Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GAA Fan TV podcast. I hope you're all keeping wonderfully well. My name is Aaron, and this is episode 31 with former Down senior footballer Mark Poland. In this episode, we look back, of course, at Mark's time playing for the Down seniors, of course, between the years of 2006 and 2017. We also touch, of course, on his time with the under-21s. Of course, he played a massive part in helping Down to reach the All-Ireland final that year in 2005. Of course, they beat Dublin in the semi-finals, of course, eventually losing out to Galway in the final. We also, of course, discussed being dropped from the team after his debut in 2006 against Sligo, coming back into the team, of course, for the 2010 season, a very famous season, of course, for Down, of course, a season in which they beat the likes of Kerry and Kildare en route to the All-Ireland final, of course, narrowly losing out to Cork. So we spoke all about that All-Ireland final day against Cork. We also spoke, of course, about that entire season, really, and what it meant for Down to beat the likes of Kerry and Kildare and reach their first All-Ireland final, of course, in 16 years. We also did, of course, touch on his club days, of course, playing for Longstone. We touched on Down reaching 2 Ulster finals in 2012 and 2017, as well as, of course, of touching on the current Down senior football team. And, of course, Mark gives his predictions, of course, ahead of the upcoming National League for Down, and some general predictions in there as well. So I do hope you all very much enjoy. Do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get straight into it. Okay, so I'm joined here now by former Down footballer Mark Poland. I suppose, first of all, Mark, I appreciate you jumping on. It'd be good to look back at your time, obviously, playing for Down and for Longstone as well. Obviously, you were a Down senior footballer for quite a long period of time. You played in 2 Ulster finals, obviously, that All-Ireland final in 2010 as well, which we'll get onto without doubt. But I suppose, first of all, how's life for yourself?
Yeah, it's slowly but surely getting back to normal, Aaron, I suppose, especially for us up in the north of the island. Yeah, it's just grateful to be able to get back on the pitch, I suppose, coaching the wee ones and that there. Yeah, it's been a long 14 months as such, but hopefully we're coming out the other side of this, and yeah, just trying to remain upbeat and positive for what lies ahead.
And I'd imagine you're excited enough anyways for GAA return. Obviously, National League, I suppose, is in a couple of weeks, and I know obviously across the border, I think he's back training now or something like that anyway. So I'd imagine it's great to be back into it anyways.
Yeah, it's huge. I suppose last year we probably felt the frustrations when down south people got back a wee bit quicker, and I'm sure they're feeling the same, seeing us up here, getting back into activity. But it's just, as I say, it's brilliant. I had our wee nursery group out last Saturday morning, and just to see the joy in the faces again, it does the heart good. So hopefully everybody can follow suit now over the next few weeks, and fingers crossed that won't ever fall upon us again.
Yeah, and I suppose hopefully for myself down in Dublin anyway, hopefully soon enough we'll be back to training and back to it as well. Hopefully anyway, if all goes well. But I suppose obviously we'll run through your time obviously with Down. I suppose looking at your time with the under-21s, I suppose right up to the seniors. I suppose who would have been like your biggest inspiration, I suppose, even growing up? I suppose before you started playing Gaelic football, like who would you have looked up to, I suppose, in that kind of time period?
When we were growing up, I suppose we were very, very lucky in that we had the Down teams of 91 and 94 to look up to. From that Down team in 91, we had our own clubman, Big Ambrose, who is sadly no longer with us, and he would have been the one that we all would have looked up to. And you go through the 91 and 94 teams, household names, the forward lines that Down had back then too. Like it's really hard to pick one player out. But I say, just from a club point of view, Ambrose was always the one that we would have looked up to. And, we were very, very fortunate to be at an age where we started playing with our club and having him sort of still involved with our Longstone seniors until he passed at the age of 39, and the values and that he brought to the club, and we were lucky that we could carry them on, as we progressed through our careers, especially once we get into the county setup, and always bringing them values back to the club as well. So along with my parents too, they were a huge influence in my own career as well. They never would have missed a match. They'd have travelled the length and breadth of Ireland when I was with Down as well. Never missed a Down match, and I suppose a good one. And my own father left his sister's wedding, missed the meal and the speeches and that, to take me to Down under 14 development squad game somewhere in Louth many moons ago. So I think that just shows you the way they felt about the game, and the things they did for me growing up. Really, really can't thank them enough.
Mm. And I suppose the buzz around Down in particular, I suppose, in that 90s period, like you mentioned there, the All-Ireland in 91 and 94, like what can you remember, I suppose, from those kind of times, and what was the general excitement, I suppose, around Down? Because obviously back then you didn't have the back door as well. So, in 90, obviously you had Tyrone who came through, they made the final, Donegal, of course, Derry, were winning All-Irelands. It seemed like any team who came through Ulster back then went on to win the All-Ireland. So what was the general excitement like around Down at that particular time period?
Yeah, I suppose, even like I was only maybe 6 whenever they won in 91, but there's memories that still linger in your head. The first one probably being the 91 All-Ireland semi-final. And I just vaguely remember being outside the house we lived in at the time, waiting on it to come on to the TV, and then obviously the thought of Down playing in an All-Ireland final. Still remember watching that there 91 final in a friend's grandparents' house as well. And then obviously my first experience, or my first trip to Croke Park, was 1994 semi-final when Down beat Cork. So yeah, it's just great memories to have. And who would have knew that I'd end up playing against Cork in an All-Ireland final years later as well. So yeah, them men inspired a generation. There's absolutely no question about it. And it was probably it's a hard thing to say that we never ever emulated them, and in terms of maybe winning an Ulster title or an All-Ireland title, getting that sort of monkey off our backs, because people still refer back to those teams, and as great as they were back in the day, as I say, they inspired a generation. We wanted to sort of make our own mark and try and, not say forget about the 91 and 94 teams, but, sort of create our own sort of legacy. But unfortunately, that wasn't to be. But yeah, they were an inspiration growing up, and a huge reason why I always wanted to wear the red and black jersey.
Mm. And I suppose obviously when you made it into the under 21s, then obviously you had that 2005 season, of course beating the likes of Dublin and getting to an All-Ireland final. Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it was probably one of the most enjoyable years I've ever had playing football. We come together that year, really no expectation on the group at all, but the further we went, the better we played. And obviously it was we played a Cavan team in the Ulster final that year that went to extra time in Clonus, and they had maybe 5 or 6 players playing for their senior team at the time. I think you had Shawnee Johnson and Michael Ling. I think there was a big fella, Paul Brady, did midfield. Anthony Gaynor, centre half back. They had fellas playing for their county team, so probably wasn't much expected of us. I think Ambrose might have been the only head in our team that was maybe featuring at the senior team at that stage. And then, as you say, we went on to Navan and we beat Dublin, and then the final was just one of those freak games where Galway actually scored more goals than they scored points. Michael Meehan and Shawnee Armstrong both scored a hat-trick each. So it's a game that'll never sort of be forgotten in terms of that there. But it's it was very disappointing. But I think that set a lot of us in the way too. A lot of that team went on and played senior football, and I think Paddy O'Rourke, who was the manager at that time, had a big say in us actually doing that, because in that time, in that year, our under 21 team would have trained side by side with the seniors, and sometimes you would have been, down with the under 21s, and other times you'd have been dragged into the senior setup too. So you were doing the S&C training at the time, and Paddy was obviously, telling you what you needed to do to maybe break into the senior squad. So there was sort of, yes, you were an under 21 team, but he had an eye on you maybe making the steps forward and the years ahead. And I think that was huge for us back then.
And do you think even that experience as well was something that kind of, I suppose we'll get onto 2010 in a moment, but do you think that experience in 2005, like I suppose playing in an under 21 All-Ireland final, beating Dublin in the semis and the whole experience with it, do you think that kind of played a part then in 2010 and that experience kind of drove you on, I suppose, when the time did come?
Yeah, like our 2005 team, I think there was myself, Ambrose was obviously injured, Aidan Carr, Conor Laverty had made the step up. I'm trying to think, Marty Clark was maybe just brought on. The Down Miners won the All Ireland in 05 and he was catapulted on the under 21 team. So we had that side, and then Down had another under 21 side, 2009, who conceded a goal against Cork in the dying seconds. And so those two teams had a big say on the 2010 panel, but there's no question about it. It gave us a taste. A lot of us had played under 21 football 2 years previous to that. So that was, or sorry, 1 year previous to that. And then we had another year in 2006 as well. So yeah, there was a huge appetite there to, as I say, go on and do well in Jersey. And, a lot of us, it wasn't for the want of trying, let me tell you anyhow, in terms of wanting to get that success at senior level, because we won Ulster in under 21. It was great, but at the end of the day, we lost out in that All-Ireland final, and losing All-Ireland finals wasn't a nice thing and isn't a nice thing. And unfortunately, we never ever got to rectify that.
And I suppose like when you made your debut down in 2006 and you came into the team against Sligo, I think it was. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was it was a tough experience, let me tell you. Down scored 4 points in that game in Markievicz Park. Threw into the deep end. It was just like, looking back now, I was like, why or what was I doing there? Because physically probably wasn't up to it. And I think it was actually even O'Hara who ran past me at one stage. They had their tails up. The crowd was baying for our bloods, and he hit me an awful rattle, and I was just like, my poor wee body isn't fit for this here yet. But yeah, took an awful lot of flack after that game, and that was Paddy O'Rourke's last game in charge as well. So, in and around the county, a few weeks after that, it was I'd say a nasty place to be, but there was some bad things said, and with a sort of county of Down sort of tradition, things weren't great for a few weeks after that there. So it was, for me, it was a baptism of fire, but at the same time, it probably thickened the skin for what was ahead, for the years ahead too. So yeah, it was, don't get me wrong, it was probably a big thing for me to make me senior debut for Down, but obviously not in the circumstances that we would have wished for.
Yeah, I suppose it definitely was. I suppose thrown into the deep end in many ways. I'd say it was definitely some experience, all right. But I suppose you kind of fluctuated in now the team. Then after that, what was kind of going through your head, I suppose, after that game? Like, was there ever even any doubts that you would come back into the team, or did you always believe that at some point when the time came, you'd get into the team?
To be honest with you, I didn't know what way it was going to pan out. In and around those years, our club we were going very, very well in the Down leagues. Frank Dawson had taken over, and we had a very, very good group of players coming through. So we were always contesting sort of the latter stages of the championship. And back then, that was my focus. That was my priority. Frank made me captain at 22. And, to be a captain of your club team at 22, especially with the players we had at that time, that was my main focus. We unfortunately lost to a Mayo Bridge team in the county final after a replay by a point. And that Mayo Bridge team, they were probably dominant down there too, So went travelling as well. I was still young, and I always probably thought that, I was still young enough to hopefully get back into a Down setup again. And then once James took over in 2010, I sort of knuckled down and said, look, I'm 25 now and I need to be serious with this. So thankfully from then, on till I sort of retired playing from Down. I was always there or thereabouts. So yeah, look, great days to look back on.
And I suppose, like, would there be any advice even you'd give maybe to other players maybe who are in a similar situation? I suppose, obviously across the country, I suppose at the moment anyway, with the fact that there's been such limited club activity, it's probably most likely a lot of intercounty teams will stick with a similar panel to what they did the year previous. So would you have much advice for people who are in that situation?
Yeah, look, it's perseverance basically. I always sort of say it's like learning your trade. A lot of young club players who are maybe doing very well for the club reckon think it's just maybe a case of I'm going to go into a county setup here and I'm going to walk in and I'm going to do things that I would do for the club, but that couldn't be further from the truth, It took me a while adjusting to that level, the speed of the game. Obviously, from being a sort of small player in stature, I had to make up for that in other ways in terms of movements and what I did when I got onto the ball, because physically there's no point in me trying to compete with bigger men and that there, especially the teams we played around that 2010 team, the Kerrys, Kildares, Corks, so yeah, I'd say perseverance, stick at it, because it just doesn't happen. Now you have your odd one or two exceptional talents who'll just walk straight in maybe at 19 or 20 years of age and have an impact, like David Clifford and that down in Kerry, but like that they're few and far between. So I always say that if you have a good base and you've come through sort of minor under 20 teams, to just keep sticking at it, and eventually your chance will come. And I suppose when your chance does come, you got to grasp it, and you got to take it with two hands, and you got to show the dedication and commitment required to get to the top.
And I suppose, like, looking at that 2010 season, like obviously a great season in many ways for Down. Obviously, you didn't reach the ultimate goal, which is obviously winning All Ireland. But I suppose, like, looking at that 2010 season in general, I was kind of having a look through, I suppose, some of the results a few of the years previous, and obviously in 2009, a defeat to Fermanagh and Wicklow. Which was a bit surprising, I suppose, looking back. Like, so what do you think it was even in 2010 that kind of propelled you on to that year, and kind of like where did the motivation come from, or ultimately how do you think you kind of had that season beating the likes of Kerry, Kildare en route eventually to Cork in the final?
Well, I would say there was probably a freshness. James came in, there was a new manager there. I wasn't really sort of involved in the previous regimes, but in 2010, I would say 99% of the best club players in Down had committed to Down that year. We had a very, very strong panel, huge panel. And I suppose with Marty Clark coming back from Australia as well, I think he added a whole lot to that year. There's no question about it. So yeah, like we had excellent players. I think when people look back in that final down in Cork, people probably underestimate. Down, it was Down. Cork was a handy All Ireland for Cork. You hear a lot of people saying but if they really sort of looked into it, went through the Down team, on the Down panel, it was just there was quality throughout it, and there was 34, 35 lads who were really pushing the boat out every night at training. And I know that there's a cliche, but that actually was true. And the further we went on that year, the more of a road we get on. And it's true in what they say with the qualifiers. That you just can't be playing matches. And once we got to Croke Park, then we just took it to another level, I think. But we did things in the final that we didn't do in the two previous games, and ultimately that cost us in the end, in my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably very easy for people to think it was handy for Cork, but I suppose they forget maybe the Kerry game or the Kildare game, or I suppose that fierce battle you had with Tyrone and Ulster as well. And looking at that Kerry game in particular, like obviously a very famous win for Down. Like, what was the game plan going into the game, and did you always kind of feel that there was the potential for a shock with Kerry in particular? Obviously, they were going in as All-Ireland champions, and I suppose we're massive favourites to win the All-Ireland again in 2010.
Yeah, they were coming in as champions, and I think Ty Kennelly had went back to Australia at that time, and Tomas O'Shea and Paul Galvin were both suspended. So, it probably, I'm not saying helped us in any way, because Kerry still had All-Ireland winners spread across the park. Yeah, look, it was just we dismantled Sligo, I think, the week or two before that. There, Breffney and Cavan, and we just carried that on to the game. I think getting into that game, yes, we knew we were up against, Kerry, but we just wanted to go out and play our own football, and we did that day. And if you look at the final scoreline, I think there might only been 6 in it in the end, but I think that might have been very favourable towards Kerry. I think there was more in that game. They got a penalty near the very end, but they always sort of cry about a goal that was disallowed in the first half, but we had won the exact same ruled out in the second half too. So look, I think it was just the fact that it had been a long time since Down has played in a big championship game in Croke Park, and that we wanted to make the most of it. It was my first appearance in Croke Park too, so I always remember getting in with Mark, like, you don't know if you're going to get this chance again, and it was just basically getting out. And I actually watched the match back over lockdown there for the first time, and the energy and the work rate of our forward line alone was just, you look back and you're like, geez, I didn't realise that we forced as many turnovers, or we worked as hard, and I always say the harder you work, football will take care of itself after that, and thankfully that day it did.
Mm. Yeah, I watched the game back as well a few days ago, and one hell of a performance definitely from yourselves on the day. Like, especially, I know for myself as a Dublin fan, I always think back to the year previous when Kerry completely dismantled Dublin, I suppose. And like, even looking at some of the players you were playing with at that time, like you'd Benny Coulter in the side and a few others like you mentioned. I mean, what was it like playing with them?
Yeah, look, I think we James always said in conversation, obviously was involved with in the last couple of years with the Down Miners, and he just brought it up in conversation one day that he had been friendly with Aidan O'Rourke, who would have been in with Kieran McGeeney in Kildare that time, and he just said that they looked through the down forward line that time, and it was just like, well, we man Mark Benny, and we've got Marty Clark to worry about. If Marty Clark marked up, we've Danny Hughes to think about, John Clark. So he said that your forward line, it's just, they were just running out of markers basically. And I think that summed it up, even from defensively too. Like, we had super players who probably never got the recognition, like Dackie Rooney and Conor Garvey and these guys, big dams and full back, Brendan McVeigh in goals, Ambrose, Callum King, probably one of the best midfield partnerships going at that time. It's just unfortunate that Ambrose got injured in a club game between the Kerry and Kildare game, because I still maintain that if we had had him that day, we'd have won the All-Ireland, no question about it.
Mm. And ultimately, that final against Cork, like, what was running through your head, I suppose, as you're doing the walk around Croke Park? You're coming out for an All-Ireland final. Like, obviously, you weren't even in the panel a year previous, so I'd imagine it was, I suppose, quite a proud moment in some ways, but at the same time, I'd imagine it's mixed emotions probably looking back at it, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a game I can't watch back. Again, tried to watch it over lockdown last year, and I turned it off after 20 minutes. I think it's something that's going to live with you forever. Like, even speaking to a few of the players who've been on that team, the fact that you get beat by a point in an All-Ireland final, and you see now how hard it is to win one, let alone get there. So, it's along with getting beaten in the county final and the under-21 final, I suppose, with the county as well. They're ones you always look back with deep regret, I suppose, because if we had won the finals we were in, I'd have walked away with a nice collection of medals. But at the same time too, I think the whole atmosphere that day, you'll never ever forget it. It's running out onto the pitch that day. It's like an outer body experience. Like, it's just really, really hard to explain to people when they ask you. Just running alongside your teammates and sort of club mates as well, contesting sort of the biggest game in the GAA. And as you say, you look back with fond memories of the run and the experiences and the memories we have. But it's, again, at the end of the day, you'd rather have that medal in the back pocket as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I suppose I'd imagine anyway, if you've tried your best to obviously forget that game, but what do you imagine was kind of the biggest difference maybe on the day for Cork? And I know they had quite an experienced team maybe kind of coming into that final, but what do you reckon yourself?
We probably give away a few points at the end of the first half. I remember Cork won a free out around the middle of the field, and I think one of our defenders might have kicked the ball away, and it was brought up, and I think Gouldinger, as Donegal O'Connor, nailed it right before half time. And we had chances in the second half, and we forced the issue that we weren't doing games previous, so it finally caught up with us, and I think their experience from the previous year's final too maybe stood to them in the end, but yeah, it's we probably should have been in at half time that day a wee bit further ahead, so it's sickening thinking back, like it really is, but look, there's nothing we can do about it now, and I suppose you have to be fair to them too, like they had been about the block an awful long time as well, so fair play to them, they get over the line that day, and you can't really have any ill feeling towards them, and as I say, they had fellas who'd soldiered long and hard too, so I'll give them this one.
Yeah, I suppose they kind of were thereabouts, I suppose, in 2009. And I know they had another final with Kerry a few years previously as well. I suppose, obviously, you got to an Ulster final as well in 2012 against Donegal, and beating Monaghan along the way as well. I suppose another big occasion for yourself.
Yeah, the semi-final against Monaghan, it was one you'll never forget either. I think we were 9 or 10 down at half time, or maybe, I don't know if it was that much. I remember Aidan Kiar scored a penalty right before half time. It was probably one of the worst halves of football we'd ever played, and we came out in the second half and turned it was an 8 or 9 point deficit over and got into the Ulster final. And again, that Donegal team who went on to win the All Ireland, we were with them at half time. I think we may have been a point down or 2 points down, but then they just took over. They took over and they blitzed us in the second half. So they went on and showed their quality by winning the All Ireland that year, and then obviously winning Ulster a few times after that again. So yeah, it's same in 2017, I suppose, the sort of same scenario in the Ulster final as well, in the game at half time, and then they end up sort of thrown run away with as well. So they're disappointing. They're things you would love to get another crack at, but yeah, like losing finals isn't easy, and unfortunately we lost our first share of them.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, like Ulster, obviously it's fairly competitive year on year. Like I suppose in the 2000s, you'd Armagh, Tyrone, and Monaghan, Donegal came along. Like I suppose it's good in many ways that Ulster is very competitive, because obviously in a lot of other provinces we probably don't see that year on year. But like, what have you made of how competitive it's been, and I suppose how tough was it year on year to, let alone win an Ulster, but obviously get to finals and be competitive as well?
Yeah, it's the toughest province. I don't think there's any question about that. As you say, you beat one team, you're met with another good team. There is no easy draw in Ulster, So yeah, look, at the end of the day, I think it was always an aim to win Ulster. And people are talking about nowadays about maybe revamping the sort of championship structure to make it, fair, I suppose. But I still think there would be that sort of tinge of sadness if the Ulster Championship was taken away from us, and we haven't won one in a while. And I know what it would mean to the fellas there at the minute who are there, and what it would mean if they won one. And I don't think Fermanagh have won a provincial title either. And you can only imagine what it would mean to them. And the scenes last year, even though there was no crowds at it, when Cavan turned Donegal over in the final. So look, it is the toughest. It's the toughest province by a mile. There's no question about that. But I suppose when you're used to it, you wouldn't have it any other way.
And I suppose when you see Cavan winning an Ulster as well, does that even give you confidence that for Down, in a few years, maybe at some point, it's not, I suppose, impossible? You obviously had that big lead against Cavan, probably should have seen the game out, but obviously Cavan just seemed to continuously keep fighting back. But do you reckon maybe, like, you're not, I suppose, a million miles away now over the next kind of couple of years?
No, I definitely think there's been progress made these last couple of years now. Yeah, you can look back to that there, and I suppose with the draw during the week there, we faced Donegal. It's a home tie. Hopefully we'll have spectators back at that stage, but it's a tough draw. But I would look at it in the way that, Down were 8 or 9 up against Cavan at half time last year, and Cavan turned Donegal, or come back and turned Down over and turned Donegal over in the final. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't be getting in and having any fear of Donegal. At the end of the day, if they want it enough, it's there. The opportunity's there. So as I say, they've made huge progress over the last 2 years, and hopefully that can continue as well.
And I suppose, like, how ultimately would you reflect back on Downs League and Championship season? last year, obviously getting promoted to Division 2, and I suppose you touched on the Cavan loss there, but obviously you beat Fermanagh, I suppose, the week previous. So how ultimately would you look back at the Down kind of league and championship season?
Yeah, look, I'd say if people had said or asked you at the start of the campaign they'd been relegated or promoted back to Division 2, we would have took that there. But looking back and obviously being in the lead against Cavan at half time that day, you would be disappointed with how that panned out, and obviously not getting the Ulster final. I think getting to that final would have helped them a game against Rome, no matter, or Donegal, sorry, no matter what way it had panned out, would have been good for them as well. So it remains to be seen now. Hopefully they can hold their own in Division 2. They've a tough opener, there's no question about it. And just with the way the leagues are this year too, like you've only 3 games, and unfortunately we don't have a home fixture too, which is disappointing. But look, there's the Mayo game will be a tough opener. There's no question about that. But the other 2 games are definitely winnable, absolutely. And as I say, hopefully we get the wins in them that'll carry them through to the championship and that big opener against Donegal and Uri.
And I suppose obviously the club scene in Down has always been very competitive down the years, and I'm sure you know all about it from your time at Longstone. And I suppose, like, do you reckon even in the next couple of years, I suppose, if more of the Kilcoo lads and some of the other kind of lads within the Down club scene kind of commit to the senior team, do you reckon then, that could be, I suppose, something very important for Down as well in the next couple of years to, I suppose, be competitive in the Ulster Championship League and All-Ireland series?
Yeah, definitely. Kilcoo, they've dominated Down football recently, and they obviously were so close to winning the All Ireland club as well. So that just shows you the standard that's in Down. There's some great young footballers coming through, and as I say, hopefully they can commit. And we've blooded an awful lot of young players this last couple of years, so we have saw progress, and there's another line hopefully coming behind them there as well. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, they all need to stick together and have that want to play in the red and black, and as I say, hopefully get that monkey off our backs and get that Ulster title, and hopefully move on to bigger and better things from there. But yeah, there's undoubted quality in Down. There's no question about that. So it's just about committing and having that dedication to stick at it, and hopefully, as I say, that the county will reap the rewards in the years ahead.
And I suppose looking at your time with Longstone as well, like obviously you were mentioning kind of some of the players earlier that have come through the club, and I suppose what's it been like, I suppose, being involved in that club, I suppose, over the past numerous amount of years?
Too many to mention. Yeah, look, we're a small rural club who punched above our weight for an awful long time. We had sort of a big crop of players coming through, maybe in and around my age and a few years older. We've had, fellas who've won All Ireland minor medals with Down in '99 and 2005, and obviously went on and represented the counties at under 21 and senior level too. So yeah, we're a proud wee club at foot of the Mourns, and yeah, we're back in Division 2 and Down at the minute. We've been there for 2 or 3 years now. So Benny Coulter's actually our club manager. So hopefully he'll get the club back in the Division 1 in the not so distant future, and hopefully we can get back competing for senior championships and that too. So we've young talent coming through as well, I suppose, and our numbers at underage level have increased, which is only going to help things too. But yeah, look, it's definitely, we're a great wee club now, and definitely punch above our weight down here.
And I suppose, like, what have you made of, I suppose, how competitive it has been in Down football? Like, obviously Kilcoo, I suppose, making that All-Ireland club final. Like, did it surprise you in many ways seeing like how successful they've been, or do you think that this was always something that was kind of coming, that because the club scene in Down is very competitive?
Yeah, it is. It's very tough, and there's no question about it. You could have said there's a lot of teams who could in any day turn over anybody, and when the championship, you've Burn, who another club with great tradition as well. So But Kilcoo have been the standard bearers over this last number of years, and they've been very, very consistent. There's no question about that. And they're the team that everybody has to catch up with. They have a brilliant manager in at the minute too, who's seemingly taken them to a different level as well. So, as I say, it's just up to the other clubs to catch up on them. And but it'll be no easy task, can I assure you that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, hopefully, anyway, we can see a good club championship, obviously, in Down this year, and see ourselves hopefully in the next couple of seasons get up to Division 1. But yeah, look, listen, Mark, I appreciate your time jumping on. Anyways, yeah, cheers for coming on.
All the best. Thank you, Aaron.